Hello, everyone. This is Mary Kurek with Frontrunners Innovate, and I have a familiar face and one that might be new to you today. And our special guest is Marjorie Margolies, and Marjorie is a former U.S. Congresswoman and has a special interest that she's been involved in that has to do with women in politics that we'll get into in a little bit. But the familiar face that you're going to see is Laura Liswood, who we interviewed several months back, that has a relative interest. And it turns out the two of these ladies know each other from way back when. And so we'll get to know what that intersection is in a little bit. Laura has done a tremendous
job. Laura is fabulous.
She's
Laura
amazing.
Yay, Laura. Go on.
Her backstory, which I love, is that she actually set a goal of interviewing all these amazing, famous political leaders, women leaders around the world, and she just did it. She just went out and did it, whether they knew her or not, you know. And she told me the story. Was it Margaret Thatcher, Laura, that you were telling me? Yes, and how she kept turning you down. Finally, she couldn't turn you down. And then when you got in with her, she was asking you about the other women you had interviewed. Exactly. And I thought that was terrific. So I want to start with you. So you're writing books now, and I think they're fascinating. But I don't know how relative they are to what you've been doing all your life, because you have some experience with Goldman Sachs. You've just done a lot of different things. You're like a Renaissance woman, some military and police experience. So give us a little snippet of who you are and what you're doing now.
Well, thanks, Mary. And I cannot tell you how delighted I am to be talking to you and to Marjorie. Marjorie and I go back a very long time, you know, in Diplomat years, as it were. But Marjorie was actually instrumental for me in encouraging me to do this work around women leaders, because Marjorie has been in the women leader space for a long time. She's, as you may remember from her history, she showed exceptional courage when she was a Congresswoman. Which, you know, great leaders do show that kind of courage. So, you know, I did have an opportunity to go around the world, meet all the living women presidents and prime ministers with the question of what would it take to have a woman president in the United States. And you could probably ask Marjorie that question. She has even a closer view than I do around that. And then, you know, as I've gotten to know the women leaders, I've seen the impact of being a woman, being from the non-dominant group, if you will. And that's what moved me somewhat into the space more of the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion space, which applies, of course, 100% to women, but also applies 100% to other non-dominant groups. And so it's the dynamic between dominant groups and non-dominant groups. And so, you know, the overlap with women's leadership is very evident in my pursuit of this diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And so, you know, I'm looking forward to hearing from Marjorie about leadership, about what it takes when you know, as a leader, when you're over scrutinized or your tolerance for mistakes are not as acceptable as tolerance for the dominant group, when you have to communicate differently, all the kinds of things that Marjorie has worked with women leaders. Because for leadership for women, I think it's not the power to dominate, but the power to influence and the power to change things. And it's redefining power that Marjorie's been doing in her life's work. So I'll leave it to that and look forward to the conversation.
Walk right into that, Marjorie.
And get things done. That's exactly right. Yeah. That was extremely well put. We can finish this interview.
Done. She did it for us, right?
Yeah.
So, Marjorie, what in the world in the early days of your life brought you into politics and into running for Congress?
You know, I wish there were a straight kind of linear answer to that. I was a journalist for many, many years, right. and I have a lot of kids. And one of the things that I said to them is, you can't win if you're not prepared to lose. You got to get on the playing field. And I mean, I said it a lot. And when in 1991, a group of very unusual, a group of women came to me and said, would you run for Congress? And it was one of those crazy years. The gentleman who was in there had been there for 22 years. it was a Republican district, a really Republican district for years. And yet I had married somebody who was in Congress, and I had covered the Hill. So I knew that I thought I could do it. I thought, and I had covered for so many years. I'm thinking every time I went in for an interview, I would think, what would it be like to try to actually influence, make things happen, get into these bills, etc. And then it became apparent that this seat was one that would be a challenge. And the gentleman who was in it stepped down. I mean, I think I was one of the factors, but I wasn't the only factor. And then it became an open seat. And as Laura knows, when there's an open seat, the chances of winning are increased, and especially for women. But not in this particular district, because it was 2.5 to 1 registration wise. So I got into the race, had to step down from being a reporter. I was mostly with NBC and its owned and operated stations, and I had been there for years, as Laura knows. That's where we met. Yeah. And I decided, roll the dice and get on the playing field. And we had a somewhat unusual story, so we got a lot of coverage, and it turned out to be the year of the woman. And I won by a tiny amount. I went into election night only with a concession speech. I was so sure that, it was just such an uphill battle, and I only won by, do you really want I'll give you the number because it's so revolting, 1,063 votes. It was a tiny amount. And that's how my career, which was a drive-by, and I won. I was really surprised.
And let me make a point that Margie just made there. Not only was it the year of the woman, but she knows also it was the year of the open seat. There were substantially more open seats in this election than there were in others. And as Marjorie says, that's much more favorable to having women running for that office.
And also it was a year, and I'll tell you kind of an interesting anecdote, which I know Laura loves. I know you love anecdotes. It was also the year that Bill Clinton did so well. He carried us in there. Yes. And he's such a charm bomber, and he really, and he's brilliant. He absolutely brilliant. And so he carried us in there, which was, as Laura knows, the reason I was put in that weird position with a strange vote. And so, and there are anecdotes that follow that, and I'll tell you them.
Marjorie is underplaying the courage of who she was and what she did as a congresswoman. And I don't know, Marjorie, if you want to explain that a little further or not, but she made some very historic actions when she was a congresswoman.
Let's hear about that. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, in 1993, Clinton had an omnibus spending bill that was, I didn't think the cuts were deep enough. I didn't think, and he didn't, they didn't get into entitlements, which of course is such a hot red wheel. So that's what I said. And I had a district that was very, very, very anti even mentioning raising taxes. And I had said that I was against across the board taxes. And I also believe that had that omnibus spending bill not passed, he would have been a one-term president. He brought us in there. And when I walked into the chamber to vote, they said Bill was on the phone. And I got on I said to him that, one, if I cast this vote, it's very likely you're going to lose this seat. Mm-hmm. 2, I'll only be your deciding vote. I won't let it go down. And I knew, as somebody who had worked with history, etc., that there had only been 2 votes like that in history, which was the impeachment of Andrew Jackson and the draft. So I knew that. So I thought that my odds were pretty good, like buying a lottery ticket. And it was a tie in the House. 217 goes down. In the Senate, as people know, the vice president breaks the tie. So, yes. And I was standing. You'll appreciate this, Laura. I was standing in the well with give me his name. I will think of it in 2 seconds. Clinton's member of Congress. He was from Clinton's district. And
she's gonna go find it. Look at her.
He said he absolutely couldn't do it. He couldn't do a 4.3 cent a gallon gas tax. I mean, it was just incredible. Heads of committees were voting against this. It was just incredible. And so I voted for it, with people jumping up and down saying bye bye Marge. But it was an incredible experience. And but the bill passed, and if you look back on it, and economists will tell you that's where the recovery in the 90s started. And as in 2000 we had a surplus, and that bill started. But that was my very short drive-by in Congress, and I've stayed in touch, obviously, and I'm pretty active with former members of Congress. But that was it, and it was an incredible experience.
Wow.
But it was also a profile in courage, Marjorie. Not every, as we have seen today, many, elected officials are just so worried about their seat, or so worried about retaining power.
Yeah, they want to stay. Yeah. I did too. I did too. I thought I would have been an okay member.
You've been a great member. Yeah.
Fantastic. So let's ramp up to past Congress. What did you decide after Congress you were going to do with yourself, and when did that decision occur?
I was asked to be the head of our delegation for the Beijing conference, and I was. Mm-hmm. And then when we got back, the White House said, we got to get more women. Hillary called us in. We got to get more women to the table. So born was Women's Campaign International. Mm-hmm. I've been at Penn for years and years and years. I graduated from there, and I've stayed in touch. So our first grant was from Annenberg, and we've been doing it since 1998. We've been in more than 50 different countries, and we train women. Sometimes they're politicians, sometimes they're farmers, and it's been wild. We almost died with COVID because we're international. And we did have some programs here for young marginalized girls. It's called the GALS program. So we are now starting again. We're just getting our funding together, and we're going to start to do international work. And you have to come with us, Laura. We'd love to have you. You'll be a trainer.
Yeah, we'd love it. It'd be great.
What kinds of trainings do you do? I'm curious.
Well, let me be anecdotal.
Okay, go ahead.
We're really random. And I don't like to say that, and my staff really doesn't like my saying it. But I'll give you an example. We doubled the number of women in parliament in Malawi. A woman by the name of Calista Chimumbu Wamutarika went onto parliament, and then she was invited to be on the president's cabinet, and then she married him. So we then had a first lady. So we had a first ladies initiative. We had a first ladies, Rockefeller funded it. We had a first ladies initiative in Malawi. Jack Murtha used to be the head of military appropriations, and we were in Liberia. And one of the things that we noticed was that they were negotiating peace, but there were no women at the table. So Jack gave us a really good grant. We went there. USAID liked us, and the head of it, Pam, just was amazing. Continued to give us grants. We had 15 people on the ground, and we trained in every single solitary village. And the main thing that we did, which is an answer to your question, I think, we do a lot of communications training. I mean, how do you get your point across? What's a beginning, a middle, and an end? What, if you have something to sell, how do you do it, et cetera. And we did that we stayed for a really long time. And then Ebola hit. And we were the ones, if you read anything about how Ebola was handled in that region of the world, it had to do with the women getting into stop the ritual cleansing. If you have Ebola, don't reject me, don't reject us, because they're the ones who are immune. But we really, that's the kind of thing we do. I mean, we try not to be arrogant. We don't do a drive-by, we don't get a grant and then come in, although sometimes we have to. We did a big one in the MENA region with 16 different nations. And when it ended, although if you go there, you see our logo on all of the women's organizations that we work with. But that's what we do. And we do a lot of, we were on our way, we do an exchange with the Mandela Fellowships. And as we were on our way to do this exchange, COVID hit. And what we were finding was that in some of the places we were going, our young girls whom we were training under the Gowns program were becoming pregnant. So we did a pilot to talk. Fascinating for me was that these girls had no idea what consent was. So it's so interesting. Wow. And that's what we do. WCI. It's very well, and Laura, you know this better than anybody else. You sit at a table with other women's organizations, and because the amount that's given to great idea that is so small, we don't become partners. We become adversaries. And I've been trying so hard to make sure that women's groups work together.
Well, and also I think you were in the forefront at for advocating for women at the peace table, because the UN finally put together a resolution for women, peace, and security to ensure, although its implementation has been spotty. But as you saw firsthand that it was the men who were doing the conflict, and so how did what's the rationale for having just the men doing the peacekeeping, or even peace negotiating? It made no sense.
That's right. No, it really is. Especially with, I can remember we did a series of trainings. The Italian government was interested in what was happening in Afghanistan. And we did 3 trainings, actually 4, because one was in Brussels. We did 3 trainings in Italy. And it was so eye-opening. It was for men and women, because we think that we really have to include men in a lot of these trainings. And I'll never forget one of the men, of course, in white. The women were all in black because it was 108 degrees or something like that. But one of the men stood up and said, if they would only understand their place, if they would only understand the Quran, and this is what they have to do. And bloop, 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 bloop. And we were there with a very distinguished group of trainers who were all trying to, their tongues were bleeding. They were trying so hard to not be offensive. And it was my lesson. I said to the guy, I said, look, you're not alone. You are not alone. So many people feel that way, especially men. And then I turned to the women who were on the other side of the room, and I said, how would you answer him? And they were brilliant. They were just brilliant. Well, in other parts of the Quran, and it was extraordinary. And it was such a lesson for us that, in not only in diplomacy, but in reality, that, don't underestimate the people with whom you are working, even though it's Sisyphusian, that they're pushing the rock up the hill. And it was fabulous. And anyway, that's how we try to do our, I say it loosely, our trainings, our get-togethers, and we do a lot of listening.
And I'd also say that the First Lady's initiative, sort of paralleling our Heads of State initiative, in some countries, it's, as Marjorie knows, it's the cultural roadblocks to getting women into political power. positions is still very difficult for them. So the fact of the matter is, often sophisticated first ladies know they have a lot of power and are able to use their power very effectively.
We had to be really careful too. We didn't go into the political area. We really did the sustainability, the human, and then we would run into a country where the president had 5 wives. We had some problems that we had to deal with.
Yeah, right.
And we did. We were really we were really good.
Yeah, right. But using that power was very smart, because it was within the bounds of the culture, and yet being able to create the kind of change, because change goes from the unthinkable to the impossible to the inevitable. But you've got to have some people. You've got to have people moving.
You're so good. You're so good. That's so. Oh yeah. Right.
That's a quote. We're going to need to have that.
That's a quote.
That is fantastic. Well, what countries do you think you're heading into next, Marjorie?
We're waiting to hear. We're Kazakhstan. We have been working with former Ambassador Dick Sweat, Richard Sweat,
right?
And we're working. We hope in El Salvador.
Right.
Where we are, it's kind of when we're asked to be, to come in. And so those are 2 that are on our front burners right now. Once we hopefully get the funding, then, and which is always just so challenging. But let me tell you what I have done. Okay. I just wrote a book. I'm such a trollop. I
was going to ask you about the book. I have it written down because I know how many
I want to tell you because
and...
so much of what we've been talking about, the questions are answered in this book. It's called And How Are the Children? And and that's because the Maasai warriors don't say how are you, they say and how are the children. And Hillary wrote the foreword, and it talks about trying to juggle, but I have a lot of kids, and it talks about one of my children. I'll you don't mind if I go here. Before I got married, I adopted 2 children. I married somebody with 4 girls. We had 6 girls. We had 2 boys, and then we took in a refugee family, and it was just a mother and a little boy. He was 4 years old, and by the time we were finished, there were 5 people in the family, and they lived with us for 25 years.
Oh my God!
I know, and I say that because the book, I asked the kids to write some stuff, and the little boy, that 4-year-old, is now an anesthesiologist. And he has 3. It's the best immigration story. It really is.
You are special. I'm going to say that's something.
It's amazing.
2 of his kids just played piano 6 months ago at Carnegie Hall. I mean, it's anyway. Vu is just amazing. Vu would say to me, "What would have happened to me had my folder been on a different desk that day?" Or what is a family these days? We're a family, a strange one, but a family. And that was in the middle of the book. And as I was reading, and I said, no, this is where the book should begin. And so this is a kid who came, who had to use a tire to go from the boat, 100 feet. His cousin drowned when they were in Malaysia, but when they left Vietnam. He's just this incredible, and it's an amazing immigration story. Anyway, it's where the book starts, and then I go into all different things, about having been in Congress and having covered stories that I elaborated on, and all that kind of stuff.
Is that book
That's
on the market?
Enough promotion, huh?
Is that on the market now? Is that on Amazon, or where can people find it?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, you can get it in Amazon. Yep.
We're gonna have to get the book cover,
and gonna have to read that. Well, I'm glad you.
And where that is. That's terrific. That says a lot about you and where you put your energies, and how impact is just runs through your entire life from beginning to end. And I think that when I think about some of the young ladies that I kind of work with, I always say I've got a little mentee that I met when I was 13, when she was 13 years old. She's now 16, and she's going to run Tanzania one of these days. I'm absolutely convinced. She speaks better English than some people here in the United States do.
Isn't that
She's
fabulous?
awesome. She's
That's
amazing.
wonderful, yeah.
Her whole family's all about education, and she believes in it. She lives it. She breathes it.
Where is she now?
Dar es Salaam.
Oh,
And
she's there. Okay.
she's there, and I'd love to bring her here someday. Her dad lives in I want to say Namibia, and her mom's there with her in Dar es Salaam. But her dad's the one that introduced her to me. He's a pharmacist and in the healthcare space. But he keeps up with her and her sister. She almost died when she was born because she had a heart condition that required heart surgery when she was like 9 days old. So they never expected her to live, but she's just like, she was born and she lived for a reason. And I keep saying she's brilliant.
How old is she now?
She's about 16, but she does public speaking. She the first public speaking I had her do in front of UN ambassadors, and she had 3 minutes. She blew them away, and I knew she would. I had to kind of coach her a little bit. She blew them away. 3 years later, she's standing in the pulpit of her church giving a sermon. I'm thinking, I wouldn't even do that. I wouldn't even do that. That would scare the snot out of me when she's doing it.
Yeah.
But and she's now doing some volunteer work with some UN related, I don't know if it's UNESCO, I don't know what it is, but in her area. But she's organized, even though she wasn't allowed to in her school in Tanzania to organize school groups herself. She's now beyond that, and she's able to kind of plan and organize little groups and clubs and things.
I've for many years I've worked with UNESCO. They are looking for interns. So if you know someone who has graduated from college and started graduate work, they want young.
I got one
okay.
who's actually here on a fellowship in Tampa from Nigeria. She's awesome. And
well, anyway, look it up. The guy Elliot Munchenberg is the guy who runs it, and I wish anyway, get in touch with them.
Okay.
They are looking for intern. It is a non-paid internship.
That's fine. She looks for any kind of education opportunity she can get.
Yeah, in New York, and they are wonderful. And of course, now they're dealing with that awful the destruction of one of their sites. Right. In Ukraine. It's terrible, but it's a perfect person. It's a perfect place for somebody who wants an extraordinary adventure.
Yeah, her thing is women's empowerment, but she will do whatever. She owns her own nonprofit in Nigeria, but she's awesome. She would be perfect. She speaks perfect English, writes beautifully.
That's great.
Speaks perfectly, publicly, all of that. That's great. Thank you for that. I'm going to leave it to Laura. Any final questions you might have of Miss Marjorie as we get ready to ask her the final question that I have?
First and foremost, I mean, what Marjorie is doing is creating a critical mass of women as leaders, because it's that critical mass of getting enough women to have the kind of influence that they need to do. What have you found, Marjorie, is the most effective way to get women who initially think of being an elected official or something as corrupt, or it would be bad for them? What do you communicate to them to get them to see what they could create and what possibilities there are for them?
Well, we do a lot of before we commit to a program, or we send folks in, and a lot of it's such a fair question. We not only sit down with them and figure out who, and you can pick it up fairly quickly, as you well know, and sometimes it's a little subtle. You can figure out who are the leaders in these groups almost immediately. But then we include the chiefs, we include the men. We talk to them. We're very, very interested in making, but we do a lot of. You get this better than anybody. We do a lot of listening, so that we'll go to a place, where we hope to have a program, and we'll see kind of a lovely picture, a woman with a little girl walking on an unpaved road, spending hours and hours and hours getting water. And you see, oh, isn't that lovely? And then you realize that these women are spending hundreds of hours. So what do? We dig a well. We just do a lot of listening. We're very practical. We're very scrappy. I mean, the stuff we do is, it's not, you hear about these huge fundraisers with enormous organizations that have fabulous overheads. That's not what we do. I mean, we're very scrappy. We adore the women. We do a lot of TOTs, training of trainers. So we'll get to a place and we'll say, okay, this is what you would like to do. Let us, we can train you. The same thing with Ebola. I mean, we had been in so many of these districts. All we had to do was, drop a dime and say, well, but remember, this is what we talked about. There are 10 things that will prevent it. Ebola is a disease of information. There are 10 things that we have to do. So that's what we most do. And a lot of it is amazing, very unsexy. We've been in places where we had to be taken around by UN troops. We're still trying to get our women out of Afghanistan. We had 2 amazing ministers, men, who helped with papers and everything like that. One of them was immediately killed. One of them had 6 kids. We brought him in. Thank goodness we got him in. We got some of the people who ran our office in Afghanistan, but most of the women who ran our programs, doctors and lawyers and professors, are in hiding. So, so what do we have to do? We have to figure out how. We know how to do this because we know people on the ground who are somewhat safe. How can we feed these women? So we're getting funding into it. We're in Ukraine, very different kind of place. In Ukraine, the women especially want to stay close by because after the war, they want to go home. In Afghanistan, the women want to get out. They want to get out and they want to come to the United States in some form. And we've been able to do that a lot. So it's a lot of moving parts, a lot of kind of frustration with paperwork and, all of the things that you kind of hope for. And you get really close and they just, and you can't open the window or close the door. It's just impossible.
Thank you. That's great. Very practical.
Yeah. Lots of work.
Getting things done.
So as you've got a lot of tentacles out there that are doing sort of different types of work, diversity in all the projects. Are there certain types of people that you need to meet, or is there one project moving forward that has your attention and your energies right now that you feel like you need certain resources? You talk about a lot of projects that need funding for this or funding for that. Maybe that's what you're looking for, but tell me what you think you need moving forward as you know what's coming ahead.
Well, I'll give you an example. We're hoping to go into Kazakhstan, and we have a lot of people on the ground who are interested in our coming. Yeah. And so we will put together what amounts to a team, trainers, and then when the funding comes in, and it has to come in from all different kinds of sources, I'll put someone in charge of it, of the mission, and then we put it together. It takes a lot of energy, but it's so positive, and it's quite amazing. One of our trainers who no longer is training because it was Joe Biden's sister, Valerie. Oh, yeah. She was amazing, but she has to be super, super, super careful, obviously. So she's no longer. But Kathleen Kennedy Townsend is one of our. Celinda Lake, who's this amazing pollster. We get terrific women who know how to kind of listen, inhale, and share.
Yeah.
Those are great women. They are real change agents, finding change.
Yeah, it's so much fun. But even more fun is to sit there saying, oh my gosh, I didn't know, it's a learning experience. I didn't know that. They're so terrific. Yeah. I also, this is for you, Laura. I also teach at the University of Pennsylvania, and the course that I teach is with David Eisenhower. And every 4 years, we take the whole class to both conventions.
Oh,
And isn't that cool?
that's very cool. Very cool. Good for you. Yeah.
This is great. You guys are learning a whole lot about each other, probably that you didn't know. I'm thinking I actually may have a resource for you, Marjorie, in Kazakhstan, I guess you said, for that project that is related to a committee that I think has something to do with the UN. It's a gentleman I interviewed a few months ago that, and I'm just going to put it this way, who has projects in the stands around Afghanistan.
Right, the stands, yeah.
All the stands or stands around Afghanistan. Used to work in the president's office pre the turnover, you know, and with the PPPs, with public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I'd
so
love
now
love to talk to him. Yes.
Yeah, he's formerly World Bank Group with the same sort of mission, and he's now with this UN spinoff sort of group that's working on starting life all over again for those people who are left behind after conflict and those sorts of things. Really smart young man. Love to kind of connect you up because he may have some inroads for you there, and maybe some funding. I don't know, because it sounds like what you're doing meets some of what he's, you know, his mission is. Yeah. So anyway, I'll get that done for you. So thank you, ladies. This has been terrific. It's a lot of fun. I knew it would be. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody else. Thank you again,
Laura.
Marjorie.
If you can send me that, but also, Laura, how can I get in touch with you? Because I'm a fan. I'm part of your fan club.
Well, back to you on that. I'm part of yours, Marjorie. Anything I can do to help you, of course I will. Mary, thank you for connecting the two of us, and you know, to be continued.
Yes, I'll make sure you two have each other's contact information. And for everybody else that's listening, these two ladies have books out on the market. We'll make sure that you have a way to connect with those and receive those. And I can't wait to see Marjorie's book that she has. And how long has that been on the market, Marjorie?
It dropped about 8 months ago.
Oh, okay. So this year.
It's relatively new. Yeah.
Okay, relatively new. All right, very good. So we'll make sure that we have the links and everything for that. So we want to say thank you to everybody else. And
thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And we'll see you again, I'm sure, in the future episodes of Frontrunners Innovate. Thank you. We appreciate it. Bye-bye. So now that you heard the interview, exactly what did you hear? We tell our clients and students that there are at least 3 opportunities in every introductory business call. You probably are hearing them, but maybe not really processing them as the opportunities they represent for you. So here are the ones that I heard in this interview. First, this interview is full of opportunities for partnerships. The first one is obvious. Marjorie's organization, Women's Campaign International, conducts training with women globally that ranges from, leadership and empowerment to peacekeeping and communications and even more. They assist with UN-related activities and help to remove people from conflict situations, and they need funding partners. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, NGOs with similar missions, programs, and geographical territories that they serve might find a favorable and supportive partner in Marjorie's organization. Imagine collaborative training trips, staff exchanges, and, networking opportunities that are up there, this kind of level right here. Marjorie shares that Kazakhstan is a destination for the next project. This one is number 3. So if you know someone who has good connections there who could assist in getting things set up, or could participate in a training program, because remember, they do a train the trainer program. So they're looking for boots on the ground people who could be trainers. You should connect with her. So I want to give you a note here, because you may be thinking, now, how is this benefiting me? Because I know a lot of people do. They think business first. I want to tell you, think impact first. That's how you get to business. All right. But here's a note. Marjorie, with her work as a diplomat and an award-winning journalist, comes with one heck of an amazing Rolodex, okay, of diplomats and high-level contacts from around the world. She is a networker's dream. There's almost nobody you probably couldn't get to through her. So let me just share that with you one more time. Networkers need people like Marjorie, who are very well connected at levels that a lot of us can't reach on our own. So just remember that. So if you're interested in learning more about business development or partnering with us, be sure to reach out. And until next time, just know that the world needs more front runners like you. Thanks. Bye-bye.